Hi, everyone. I'm Crista Cowan. I am the corporate genealogist here at Ancestry. And today we are going to be talking about your Ancestry DNA Match List. So this is a beginning webinar. So if you've got more advanced questions, you're going to want to take a look or keep an eye on the schedule to see when we're going to be able to cover some of those more advanced topics. But this is very specifically about understanding your match list. So there are two other classes I have already taught that if you have not yet watched them and you are a beginner, I strongly encourage you to check those classes out. The first one is called Family Tree Building 101. And so if you have not yet started your family tree, that's a great place to get started to build that tree, kind of get you going. The second class is called AncestryDNA 101, and that is a basic explanation about things like the random inheritance of DNA, how your DNA test gets processed, and then what you get back with your Ancestry DNA test results. Now, at the end of that AncestryDNA 101 class, we talked very briefly about the match list. And that's going to be our focus today, is that AncestryDNA match list, exactly what it can show you, what you can do with it, and how you can use it to make family history discoveries. There are three primary reasons that someone would want to use the Ancestry DNA Match List. Now, a lot of people take the Ancestry DNA test because they are just interested in ethnicity, or they are just interested in their traits, or they're just curious about, where in the world their DNA is from 500 to 1,000 years ago, or within the last 300 years. And all of that you can do without ever engaging in the match list. But the match list, once you dive into it, can help you with three very specific things. And I am going to cover all three of these things today and show you the tools you can use to meet one or all of those goals. Okay, the first reason that people use their match list when they take an Ancestry DNA test is to discover unknown parentage. So, for example, if you are an adoptee and you are looking for your biological parents, or if you were raised by a single mom or by a stepfather and you're looking for your biological father, or if you have a parent who is in one of those situations and you're looking for a biological grandparent, that is what we call unknown parentage. And a DNA test can almost always help you solve that, figure out who your biological family is. That's one reason people take an Ancestry DNA test. Another reason people take an Ancestry DNA test is to add what's called a layer of genetic evidence over the research they've already done. This is the circumstance that I find myself in. So I've been doing family history since I was about 12 years old. My parents had done it for decades before that. Lots of people in our family have been involved in building a family tree. And so when I first took an Ancestry DNA test, all the way back in 2012, when Ancestry started doing DNA testing, people asked me, why would you do that? You don't need to figure anything out. And I said, well, I want to make sure that I've connected the correct parents to the correct children all the way back in my family tree. So you can add this layer of genetic evidence that, yes, these are the parents and these are the parents and so on back through your family tree. That's the second reason, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, show you how the tools help with that. And then the third situation or reason why people typically take an Ancestry DNA test and then use their match list is to break through genealogy brick walls. So if I, like I do, have a great-great-grandparent and I have no idea who his parents are, this is an opportunity for me to start to collect genetic evidence that's going to help me break through that brick wall. I have already broken through at least 3 brick walls in my own family tree with my DNA match list, and my most stubborn brick wall is starting to crumble because of it as well. And so I'll show you some of that, how to do that. So that's what we're going to be covering today, is how to use your Ancestry DNA match list to solve unknown parentage for yourself or a parent, how to add it as a layer of genetic evidence on your family tree to make sure that you're climbing your family tree and not somebody else's because you made a wrong turn somewhere, or how to break through those genealogy brick walls. And we're going to do it very much from the lens of a beginner who is just getting started. Now, if you are not a beginner, I think there's still going to be some value in here because I suspect that you may not know about all of the tools or features that are available, and this could be a really great refresher course. Okay, so with that said, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to share the screen. Here we go. And you should all be seeing my family tree right about now. Awesome. Okay. And then let me just make sure that if I switch over here to my DNA match list, that you are also seeing that. Yes. Okay. Fabulous. So let's talk a little bit. Let me just refresh this. Let's talk a little bit about your AncestryDNA match list. So when you get your AncestryDNA results, you can access your matches directly through this menu item here, or through this tab right here in the kind of top middle-ish when you're viewing any other part of your DNA results. Your DNA match list is going to include everybody among the 27 million people who've tested, who share a measurable amount of DNA with you, where we are confident based on the science that this person is related to you through a common ancestor. The list is organized by the people who share the most amount of DNA with you at the top, all the way down to the people who share the least amount of DNA with you at the bottom. So as new people test, they get added to your list. And that means they're going to get slotted in numerically into the list where they share that DNA with you. Now, the amount of DNA you share with your matches, let me just enlarge my screen a little bit so you can all follow along, is measured in what we call centimorgans. So a centimorgan is just simply a measurement of how much DNA you share with this person. And you're going to see that on every one of your DNA matches. Next to that, you're also going to see a percentage of shared DNA. And if you remember from our Ancestry DNA 101 class that I hope you've watched, that there's some simple math formulas around inheritance of DNA, and then there's the concept of random inheritance that comes into play. So luckily, I have a lot of close family members who've tested. So as I walk you through this, I can use personal examples. And just to assuage any concerns, I do have the permission of my family members to share this information. So I have tested both of my parents, mostly just out of curiosity. So I personally didn't need to take an AncestryDNA test because I had tested both of my parents. So I can't inherit anything they didn't give me. I tested because I was just curious what portion of the random 50% of their DNA I got. But when I'm actually working on my DNA matches, I'm using their match lists. Now, I share 50% of my DNA with my dad, 50% of my DNA with my mom. And that's going to be true for every person. Every person gets half of dad's DNA, half of mom's DNA, and that makes up half of who they are on each side. Now, I have also tested all 4 of my siblings. And here's where you start to see that random inheritance come into play. I share a range of DNA with my siblings. So my baby brother here and we share more DNA than the oldest of my 3 brothers down here. But it's all pretty tight around that 50% range. Then, you keep going down the list, the amount of DNA gets lower and lower. In my family, we've tested two of my dad's siblings, so my Uncle Brad and my Aunt Rhonda. We've tested my mom's sibling, her only full sibling, and then my grandma. I had one living grandparent at the time that Ancestry started doing DNA testing, and so I was able to test them. Now, that's really important, and something you all should realize is that if you have anyone in your family who is older, you're going to want to make sure, older in generations, you're going to want to make sure that you get them tested as soon as possible. The fact that I have my grandmother's DNA has enabled me to break through more brick walls, have more genetic evidence than if I hadn't had her DNA. So if you've got other family members that you want to get tested, I strongly, strongly encourage you test those older generations first. My grandmother actually passed away in 2018, and I'm just so, so grateful that we have her DNA to work with. Okay, then below that, you're going to start to see my first cousins. So Casey and Jeremy and DM and Tortuga, Alyssa, Scott, Rebecca, Greg, like all of those are my first cousins. As a matter of fact, I think I have only one first cousin who hasn't tested. Now, right in the middle of that, we have this woman, Carol. If you've listened to, I did a whole podcast episode just a couple weeks ago about my new Aunt Carol. So Carol is a woman who DNA tested, and it turns out that she is my mom's half sister. So she is a half aunt. Did you know you could be half an aunt? So that was kind of an interesting surprise, but she shares the same amount of DNA with me as my first cousins because of the nature of her half relationship with my mother. So again, as you move down the DNA match list, the amount of shared DNA is just going to get smaller and smaller. And as new people test, they're going to get put into the list numerically where they fall based on how much DNA you share with them. So that's the first thing you need to understand about your match list is the way that it is organized. Now, that default sort is by the amount of shared DNA, but you can switch that. If you've been working with your match list for a while and you know all these people, you can switch it so that you can see your newest matches at the top of the list. You just click that sort button, it'll sort that match list, and now everybody on the top of your match list will be the new matches that have come in for most of us within the last week. I probably get an average of 70 to 90 new DNA matches every single week. Now, most of them are going to be way down in the weeds in the 8, 9, 10, 12 centimorgan range, which are going to be some very distant cousins in most cases. But every once in a while, we have a second or third cousin that pops up, and that's kind of exciting. So you have control. The default sort is most amount of DNA to least amount of DNA, but you can sort it by newest to oldest. Now, while we're talking about some of the ways to sort or search your match list, let me just point out some of the filters that are available to you. In Family Tree 101, Family Tree Building 101, we talked about making sure you start your family tree, get yourself, your parents, your grandparents, and then if you can talk to family members and add your great-grandparents as well, you're going to want to do that. In our AncestryDNA 101 class, we talked about making sure that your DNA is attached to the person in the family tree who took the test. So you want to make sure that you've got your DNA attached to your tree. If you're not sure, just look for this little link over here on the left-hand side. You see where it says view tree link to your DNA matches. That'll make sure that you've got the right tree, your DNA is attached to your tree. If your DNA is not attached to your tree, you can do that in your tree settings. Now, I'm making a big deal out of this for a couple of reasons. One, you are going to be able to make more discoveries even if you just have a little tree attached. If all you know is, the names of your parents and 2 or 3 of your grandparents, put that into the tree, make sure your tree is attached to your DNA. Then Ancestry can do some additional work to see if we can't figure out how you connect to some of your other DNA matches and to some of the other family trees on Ancestry. So add a tree, attach it to your DNA, even if you aren't sure about a whole lot of information. If you are an adoptee or you have an unknown parent, then put in what you know and attach your DNA to it. So if all you know is, your birth name and the year you were born, put yourself in, attach your DNA. If you have some clue about the ages of your biological parents, if you've got non-ID or a suspected name of a birth father, put that information into the family tree. You're always going to want to make sure that the DNA is attached to a tree, though, that reflects your biological relationships. DNA is only biological, and so you want to make sure that the tree that is attached to your DNA reflects those biological relationships. Okay, once you have that tree attached, then there's going to be some of these filters that are going to work a little better for you than otherwise. So the first filter here on this list is what we call unviewed matches. Over here on the right, unviewed matches are going to show you the matches that you haven't clicked through and looked at yet. So it's just going to filter that list down to those people that you haven't gone in and explored. And that's what I want you to do, is just go in and explore your matches. We'll explore a couple of them here in a minute so that you understand what you'll be looking at. Common ancestor. This is a filter that only works if you have your DNA attached to a tree. Because what happens is Ancestry looks at your tree and looks at the trees of your matches, and we try to see if we can figure out how you might be related based on that family tree data. And if we can find who we think might be a common ancestor for you to explore, we will show that to you on that match page of those people who have a common ancestor hint. It is just a hint, just like record hints in your tree. You do still have to explore it. You have to validate it, make sure that it's accurate. But that's us trying to give you a little boost and help in exploring who those common ancestors might be. Those new matches, again, you can access those also by this sort. Then you can filter just to matches where you have put notes. We'll talk about that in just a minute, where you can do that. And then you can hide matches. That is, before Ancestry introduced a bunch of filters, that was an easy way to kind of filter your match list. I actually don't hide matches anymore, so I don't have to worry about going to find them. But for those of you who are accessing your match list on a mobile device, one of the things that I've come across is that sometimes it's really easy to accidentally or easily swipe and hide a match. And so this hidden matches list, just check it once in a while. Make sure you haven't hidden anyone that you didn't intend to hide. So those are the basic filters for your DNA match. Then you have some additional filters around a couple of different categories. So one of them is for matches that also have family trees. So you're going to notice very quickly out of your however many tens of thousands of DNA matches that some of them have family trees and some of them do not. So that's kind of the two basic categories. For those matches that have trees, there's going to be these three options. An unlinked tree means they have a family tree, but they haven't actually attached their DNA to that tree yet. What that means is that when you're viewing that match, you have no idea who the person is in that tree that took the test. Remember, you should always attach your DNA to the person in the tree who took the test. And so you need to make sure when you're looking at an unlinked tree of one of your matches that you recognize you don't always know who took the test. Now, a public linked tree means this person has a family tree, they've linked their DNA to that tree, and that tree is public. Now, public tree on Ancestry, what that means is anybody with an Ancestry subscription can see the dead people in the tree. So living people, automatically privatized by Ancestry, and Public just means within the Ancestry ecosystem. So you do have to have some level, any level of family history subscription on Ancestry in order to view those public trees. And then a private linked tree simply means they have a tree, they've linked their DNA to it, but they, in their tree settings, have made their tree private. So you can see that a tree exists, but you can't actually view the whole tree unless you ask that person for permission to view that tree. So those are the tree filters, and you can go explore, for example, especially if you're brand new, just filter to everybody who has a public linked tree so that with you, if you have a subscription, can view those matches that have family trees. The next set of filters here is the amount of shared DNA. So everybody always asks, well, how do I know how many DNA matches I have? Well, this is where you come in to see that. Right here, it tells me that I have 43,789 DNA matches as of today. So that's your count. If for those of you who are number nerds like I am, you can see that. I also have, out of those 43,000 plus matches, 2,411 of those matches are what we consider fourth cousins or closer. So I have matches that share a certain amount of DNA with me that is in kind of that range that should be, for most of us, fairly easily discoverable. Now, remember, if I'm dealing with unknown parentage, or if I have brick walls in my tree that I'm trying to break through, those fourth cousins and closer are going to be really valuable to me. If I am just using AncestryDNA for a layer of genetic evidence, I should be able to identify how I am related to almost all of those fourth cousins and closer, depending on how big my tree is, and if I have correctly identified the parents at each generation in my family tree. So this is an interesting number just to kind of start to wrap your brain around how many matches you should start to be able to figure out in that close range. Then if I'm looking just to jump to a specific place in my match list, 43,000, I'm not going to page my way through all of those matches, but maybe I want to look at just matches who share 20 to 30 centimorgans of DNA with me, or 50 to 60 centimorgans of DNA with me. I can filter that by a particular range. Now, we're going to talk about groups in a minute, and probably pretty extensively for the last part of our time together. So I'm going to skip that filter for now. We're next going to talk about this by parent label. So one of the things that Ancestry does is we are able to look at your DNA compared to the 40, 50, 60, 80,000 DNA matches that you have, and we're able to start to kind of split them into sides. We use this proprietary technology called side view, and it allows us to say, these matches match you because of parent 1, and these matches match you because of parent 2, or some of these matches match you on both sides. And your DNA doesn't come labeled in your body, so there's no way for us to know whether it's mom's side or dad's side. So when you first get your DNA results, it will just be labeled parent 1, parent 2. Hopefully, if you've tested some close family members, you'll be able to very quickly realize which parent is which. Now, somebody's going to ask this question, even though what I just said hopefully made sense, but I'm going to answer it really explicitly. Parent 1 could be your mom or it could be your dad. And it is different for every person. So parent 1 is not always mom for everybody. Parent 1 could be your mom. My parent 1 could be my dad. Okay. So you have to look at your matches and see if you can figure it out. As soon as you figure it out, you can edit that label. So then parent 1 becomes whichever parent, and parent 2 becomes whichever parent. As soon as you edit those labels, they get changed everywhere in your AncestryDNA experience. So I now have my matches labeled paternal and maternal because I tested parents, which is which. So I can filter then by parent 1 or parent 2. Now, this side view technology by parent You do have to have, again, any level of Ancestry subscription in order to access this. So if you just took a DNA test and you don't have a family history subscription, you won't be able to see that level of granularity. You can also, if you don't have a subscription, you can also just go in and manually label your matches, maternal side, paternal side. So father, paternal, mother, maternal, you can add that label for yourself, and then you can filter by that as well. So we give you that control to be able to do that. Okay, so that is your filters that you have available to help you manage what might for some of you feel like a little bit of overwhelming amount of data when you're looking at this DNA match list. Now, here is the first thing I want you to do. If you have not already done this, the very first thing I want you to do, if you're able to follow along right now with me live, or if you're watching the recording of this later and you want to hit pause and go check, I want you to make sure that your tree is linked to your DNA, that your DNA and your tree are linked. Again, you're going to look right here for this linking. And if you don't have it, you can go into your DNA settings to do that. Okay. The second thing I want you to do, so as soon as you get that checked or fixed, you can unpause me if you're watching the recording. Can't do that when you're here live. But what I want you to do is I want you to see if you can identify your top 10 matches. So most of us, unless you are looking for biological parents, most of us should be able to identify these top matches. And as soon as you know who this parent is, you can do a couple of, or who this person is, you can do a couple of things. So over here on your match list, you're going to have an add button on every match, and you're going to have a little ellipses on every match. Okay. If you click the add button, you can add or edit the relationship. So if I know this is my father, I can list him as my father. Now, Ancestry is going to give you a predicted relationship on every one of these matches based on the amount of shared DNA, based on the self-reported birth year of the person who took the test, and based on the self-reported gender of the person who took the test. We're going to show you what we think the relationship is. But if you remember from our Ancestry DNA 101 class, the further down the list you go, the more possible relationships there are. So if you know who this person is, you can just edit the relationship. So for example, like this is my uncle, but technically, genetically, he could also be my half brother. Like that's how much DNA, an uncle and a half sibling, they are going to share the same amount of DNA with me. And so if I know who this person is, I can edit that relationship. So again, I want you to be able to do that for your first 10 matches. The next thing you can do is you can add or edit a note. So I can come in here on any of these matches and I can just add a note about who this person is. That's especially helpful if they have used a username that you are not going to readily recognize. So if I come down here, Tortuga32094, I can add a note that this is actually my cousin Kimberly. Okay. And I can put in that note. And now, every time I scroll past this, I don't have to remember who this person is because I've added her name right here in the note, and that's going to show up on this match list. So that's one way to use the notes is if somebody has used a username and you figure out who that person is, put their actual name right there so that you don't have to utilize the brain power to remember that every single time. Okay, so identify your first 10 matches. You're going to edit the relationship so that it reflects the correct relationship based on what you know. And then you're going to edit or add a note wherever you feel like you need to do that. Okay. Now I am just going to stop sharing my screen for just a second. And I am going to hop over here and see if there are any questions about what we've talked about so far that our member services team feels like I might need to answer out loud so that everybody can get the answer for themselves. And I am not seeing anything in my doc, so just making sure. Okay, hopefully people, hopefully member services is taking good care of you in the Q&A if any of that didn't make sense, but I want you to kind of work your way through that. Now, one of the things that I oftentimes get asked, and I'm seeing some questions come through, and I just want to make sure. So, one, if you go to edit the relationship and the option that you need, especially in those first 10 matches, is not there, that is a pretty good indication that that person is not related to you in the way that you think they are. Here's what I mean. If you have tested, for example, a sibling, and you thought that person was your full sibling, meaning you have the same two parents, but when you go to edit the relationship, full sibling is not on the list, that is an indication that one of you likely has a different parent, and that you are only, in fact, half siblings. Similarly, like if you go to edit a label for a first cousin, and first cousin is not an option to pick on the list, it is an indication that your parents may not be full siblings. They may, in fact, be half siblings. Okay, so this is the place where a lot of people start to make discoveries about relationships in their family, in their close family, that are not as they expected. Now, once you get way down the list, past those fourth cousins, every possible relationship is not going to be on the list. And so we do give you just a distant cousin option to add them to that category beyond fourth cousins. But for those close-in relationships, pay close attention to the amount of shared DNA. And if the possible relationship is not there, you need to kind of keep that in mind, okay? Now, there are some exceptions to the rule. For example, if your parent and their sibling are identical twins, that's going to cause all sorts of messiness in your DNA. For example, if you have a parent who's an identical twin, your mom and her sister, your aunt tests, she's going to show up as your mom because it's the same amount of shared DNA. And her kids are going to show up as your half siblings, right? So those possibilities or those kinds of exceptions are not accounted for. But because genetically, it's as if she is your mother, it's as if they are your half siblings. So keep that in mind as well, okay? Now, yes, you can do this on your mobile device as well. So you can edit relationships, you can add notes, you can do all of that on a mobile phone or on a tablet as well. Of course, I'm just showing you the web version right now, so I hope that that is useful for you. Okay, a couple of other questions that came up, and then we're going to dive headfirst into creating custom groups and how you can use that in order to make additional discoveries. So somebody asked about what if all of your grandparents are deceased? Is there anything you can do to help kind of test different sides of your family tree? Yes. So in my case, right, I only had one living grandparent. I tested her, but 3 of my grandparents were already deceased. So I immediately tested all of my parents' available siblings who were willing to test, because by testing them, I get more of my grandparents' DNA represented. The other option, and then we started to do this in my mom's family, because my mom only had one full sibling, we started testing her first cousins on both sides. So that way, when we're looking at my mom's DNA match list, we could look at the shared matches and very quickly sort through which side or which grandparent those matches come from. So wherever possible, you always want to test as many family members who are willing, because that's going to give you this large base of DNA to work from to represent that deceased generation. Okay. So let me go back to now sharing my screen, and we are going to dive into what are called custom groups. And in order to explain how to create your custom groups, I'm just going to show you my family tree for a minute. Now, we offer you lots of different avenues for creating groups. You can use whatever scheme you want to. There is no right or wrong way to do this, whatever works for you. So I'm going to share what I do. And I want you to start to kind of think about how that might translate for you. Now, remember, of the 3 reasons why people use their Ancestry DNA matches, for me, my primary reason was a layer of genetic evidence over the family tree I had already built. And then my secondary reason was to break through some of those brick walls. So for me, I decided that the most effective and the most manageable way to create my custom groups was to do it at the great-grandparent level. So you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, right? It just doubles with every generation. You could create 64 custom groups if you're an Ancestry Pro Tools subscriber. You could create 16 custom groups if you're not, right? So you have this ability, oh, I don't know what that was. You have this ability to create multiple schemas or multiple kinds of groups. But I'm going to recommend, especially if you're newer to this, to start with your 8 great-grandparents. Now, the first thing that I did was I decided on a color coding system. And I just decided, since I have 8 great-grandparents, I was going to do the colors of the rainbow because I memorized that in the 2nd grade and I've never forgotten it. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, pink. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, pink. And so it was an easy way to remember always what order they went in. Then what I did was I came in here to each of my matches or each of my great-grandparents, and just as a visual on my family tree, I just dropped a little emoji in the suffix field that was that color. That's so that I could see on my tree and in my match list exactly what the different lines are, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know how to add emojis, if you're on a mobile device, it's just part of your keyboard, right? But if you're on a computer, I know, for example, on a PC, I just hold down the Windows key and the period, and it pops up a little emoji keyboard for me. You can also just go out and do an internet search for red heart emoji, and you can copy and paste from there. So lots of different ways to do that. But the important thing is, the other thing I did actually was I just went and printed out my family tree. So just did a quick print of the 4 generations of my family tree chart, and then just took a marker, and I actually have that hanging on my desk right next to my computer monitor so that I can see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, pink. Okay, again, like you can do any other kind of color scheme, but for me, that was the one that made the most sense. So now each of my great-grandparents has been assigned a color, and that color is going to be used now in my custom groups on my match list. And that color is going to represent this person and their 2 parents. So when I come over here and I go to, well, I don't want to create a group just yet. Just kidding. I want to actually look at my groups. Add or edit groups. There we go. Okay. You can see now here I have group 1, and I've numbered it. Group 1 is Cowan Noack. Group 1 is red, and it is Cowan. It should be Cowan Inman. I was in a hurry trying to edit things. So I'm going to edit this. It's going to be Cowan Inman. There we go. Okay. Then I'm going to add another group. We're going to add, we're going to add a group, and we're going to create a new group. And this is going to be group 2. And it is going to be Noack Cadets. And it is going to be orange. And I'm going to create that group. And now you see group 2 show up here. So group 2 from my tree, should be Noack Cadets. Yep. Awesome. Group 3, Mulliner-Willis. Group 4, Heaps-Ditmore. Okay, so I've just gone through and one at a time created those groups. I've given them a number. I've given them the names, the surnames that are part of that branch of my family tree. And then I've assigned the color. Okay. So if you have never created groups before, again, if you're watching the recording, you can hit pause. I want you to go do this. If you're watching this live, maybe jot down some notes, try to follow along as best you can. You'll want to come back and watch this. We'll have the recording up shortly. But the idea is you want to decide on your custom group strategy and then color scheme, and then you want to come in and create all of those groups, and you're going to want to do that before. Now, if you do not know who a biological parent is or who either biological parent is, you're going to just want to create group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. Probably start with 4 groups, and then you're going to want to start just sorting your matches into those 4 groups based on who they match. Okay, we'll get there. Okay, but if you know who all 8 of your great-grandparents are, you're going to want to do this. If you only know who your 4 grandparents are, start with just 4 groups and do it that way. Now, if you've created custom groups before and your groups are a mess, I'm going to give you permission right now to click on any one of those groups and just delete it and start over. These are not filing systems that are set in stone. Custom groups should be ways for you to explore your match list and make discoveries. So don't panic. I give you permission to just delete the group. Then you can go back and come up with an intentional system for how you're going to add people to those groups going forward. So that is, we're just going to save that right now. That is how I created my custom groups, is I went in and I did it very intentionally from the beginning, assigned against those ancestors. Now, you had the task of identifying your first 10 matches. Now you have the task of creating those custom groups. Now you can go through each of those matches and assign a match to a group or to multiple groups. So here's what that's going to look like. My dad, so here's my dad in my family tree. I am related to my dad because I am also related to all 4 of these people, which means my dad is going to be in groups 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I can just come in here. I can make sure he is in groups 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then on my match list, I will see that right here in the note section of my match with him, groups 1, 2, 3, and 4. My mom, I am related to her, and she is also related to all 4 of these people. So I add her to groups 5, 6, 7, and 8. My siblings, I'm related to them because of all 8. They are also related to all 8 of our great-grandparents. And so I can just go through and add them to all 8 groups. And I could go through each of my siblings and do that. Okay. My aunt and uncle on my dad's side, groups 1 through 4. My mom's sister, groups 5 through 8. Okay. My grandma, okay. My grandma on my family tree, she is only related to these 2 people. So she is only going to be part of the yellow group and the green group. That's all I'm going to add her to. And kind of, you just work your way through those matches. My new Aunt Carol, I am related to her only through these 2 groups. She is a descendant of both of those people. So I add her to those 2 groups. So again, that's the task, is to work your way through your match list or through your match list and add them to the groups. Okay. So the idea is, with your first 10 or so matches, they're going to be descendants of these people. But as you start getting further down your match list, now you're going to have descendants of these people back here on the back side. And so then it's just a matter of which ancestor do I have to go through to get to them. So let's look at an example of that on my match list. We're going to scroll down. I'm actually going to expand my match list a little bit, and we're going to look for my cousin Catherine on my match list. She loves that I use her for this. So way down here, there's Catherine. Okay. Catherine is my dad's second cousin. So she's my second cousin one time removed. She and my dad are second cousins, and I'm a generation down. So second cousin one time removed. Okay. Catherine is a descendant of Park and Carrie through Frederick's brother. So Frederick and his brother Robert, and then Robert had a daughter, Helen, who's my grandpa's first cousin, and then Catherine and my dad are second cousins. And then I'm one time removed, okay? So Catherine is only related to me because I am a descendant of Frederick. So that means the only group that she gets added to is that number one red group, okay? So that is how you're going to start to add your matches to groups. And you want to start with the matches that you know who they are and how they're related to you. So hopefully you can kind of work your way through the first group of matches on your page. If you don't know any of these people for now, kind of skip over them. Look just for matches you know and how you know how you're related to them. Then the next step is to use that filter and look for common ancestor hints. So again, this is Ancestry, looking at your tree, looking at your matches tree, and trying to see if we can figure out between your two trees or the other 100 million plus family trees on Ancestry, if we can give you a recommendation or a suggestion about how you might be related so that you can go investigate that a little bit further. So first, you're going to look at all your first 10 or so matches, see if you can assign them to groups. Then you're going to filter to common ancestors and just kind of explore those. So let's take a look at a match page so that you know what that's going to look like. Again, I'm going to come back down here to cousin Catherine, and we are going to look at her match page a little bit closer. Okay, so here's Catherine's match page. So I'm looking at a match between me and Catherine, and I've already edited this relationship, but if I need to do it, I can do that here from this page as well. So you can do it from the match list or from the match compare page. If I wanted to send Catherine a message, I could do that from here. And if I have Catherine already in my family tree, I can say, hey, this person on my match list is the same as this person who's already in my tree. And so I can kind of connect those two things. I showed you we can add her to the group, or I can add the note. So all of that I can do from the match page or from the match list. So match list, match compare page. Now, if Catherine has a tree linked to her DNA matches and I have a subscription, I can view a little snippet here of her tree, or I can click to expand the tree and view the whole thing. So for matches that you don't know or you don't recognize, you want to come in here and look at their tree and see if you recognize anything. If there are any people in their tree who are also in your tree, and Ancestry recognizes they're the same people, we'll highlight them in green. You see here, Park and Carrie, totally highlighted in green. These two individuals were entire characters in their own main character stories. And here they show up, okay? If Ancestry recognizes that those are the same people, we will give you a common ancestor hint. And I can click on that. We're going to go to Carrie. I'm going to open that in a new tab. And it's going to show me this little relationship ladder for how Catherine and I are related. So Carrie is one of our common ancestors, Carrie and her ex-husband Park. Frederick and Robert are brothers. It's Carmel, not Helen. Fred and Carmel are first cousins. Steve, my dad, and Catherine are second cousins. And then there I am, one time removed down there. So it's going to show you the proposed path of the relationship between you and your DNA match if you both have trees attached and Ancestry can figure it out or thinks they can figure it out. Now, one little thing you need to know about this proposed relationship path, this common ancestor hint, if all of these boxes are white, do you see how all of these are white boxes? What that means to me is that I have all of those people already in my tree. If I click on any one of these people, it's going to take me to that person in my tree, okay? So that's important. If any of these boxes are kind of translucent and have a dotted line around them, what that's telling me is I do not have this person in my tree. And if I click it, it's going to open up a little side panel to say where Ancestry got this information from, why they're recommending it to me as a person in this path of connection. And so then I can go explore the other family trees or the records that tell me that this person is a relative in this family. Now, keep in mind, not everybody gets it right. Sometimes records are wrong. So we give you the opportunity to explore that to decide for yourself if it is accurate or not. And sometimes you don't have enough information to know. Sometimes it's going to send you down a delightful rabbit hole of research to figure it out. Sometimes you figure it out and it's right and you can add it to your tree, and then eventually within a few days that box will turn white because now you have that information in your tree. Sometimes you'll figure out it's wrong, but you'll figure out the right answer in the process, and then you'll add that information to your tree, and this entire relationship path over the course of the next few days may change. So these through lines, these common ancestor hints are dynamic, which means every time somebody changes something in their tree, they have the ability to shift and change as people start to come to figure out what the right information is. So that is how you view a common ancestor hint, is by clicking on that and reviewing that path, okay? Now, if Catherine has no tree, or if she has no tree, you're probably going to want to send her a message. But what I would do before that is I would look at shared matches. So every one of you who has taken an Ancestry DNA test can click on the Shared Matches tab with any one of your matches, and we will show you at least 3 matches that you have in common with that person, okay? So if you've taken the Ancestry DNA test, you will get at least 3 matches. That's important because then if you've tested some close family members, you'll at least be able to know kind of which side of the family tree this person matches you on. If you have any level of Ancestry subscription, you will see the full list of your Ancestry DNA matches all the way up to, or all the way down to 20 centimorgans. So every match that me and Catherine have in common between the two of us, all the way down to 20 centimorgans. Now, the reason we cut that off is because once you get below 20 centimorgans, there's actually more of a chance that the two of you are related to this person on entirely different branches of your family tree, not that you have a common ancestor between the 3 of you. So that's why that cut off. So 3 shared matches if you have no subscription, a full list down to 20 centimorgans of matches, of shared matches if you have any level of Ancestry family history subscription. And then if you have Ancestry Pro Tools, so that's an add-on to any subscription, we give you a whole additional column of information on this shared match list. So here is my shared match list with Catherine. You'll see my dad, and it's going to show me how much DNA my dad and I share. And then it's going to show me how much DNA my dad and Catherine share. And so as you start to work your way down the list, this is going to show you exactly how much DNA that other person shares so that you can start to get an idea of how you might be related to them if you don't know who this person is or if they don't have a family tree. So We recently introduced an additional feature to this little Pro Tools, which is the ability to sort. Remember, my match list always shows me highest to lowest amount of DNA I share with this person. But here now, because I have Pro Tools, I can see the highest to lowest amount of DNA that Catherine shares with these people. And that's important because if Catherine didn't have a family tree, but now all of a sudden I know, oh, her daughter Karen also tested, and Karen does have a family tree, I can go look at her and figure out how we're related. So I don't have to try to do a lot of the hard work if she has close family members who've tested. So that is really the goal of all of this, is to help you start to figure out very systematically how you're related to each of your matches. Sometimes that means that you need to be building out your family tree a little bit. Sometimes that means that you need to build the family trees of your matches a little bit. You know, if they've only got one grandparent in there or two grandparents in there, you can go look them up in census records or obituaries to see if you can figure out who their other grandparents are, who their great grandparents are. I do lots of tree building of my matches, trying to piece those things together. But ultimately what it does is it enables you to figure out who your ancestors are. Now, if you already know that, that's amazing, because now you can make sure that you've done it right. If you all of a sudden realize as you're going through that you have 7 groups that are showing up repeatedly, but that 8th group, you never have any matches to it, that could be an indication that that ancestor is not really your ancestor. And so it gives you another opportunity to explore. If you are a person who is looking for biological parents or grandparents, you're using your match list not to figure out how you're related to these people, but how they're related to each other. And you're going to start figuring out, oh, these 5 matches all are first cousins, and these are their grandparents. And these 10 matches over here, they're all second cousins, and these are their great-grandparents. So you're figuring out the matches of how other people are related to each other. And then it's just a matter of math to figure out how they're related to you. And if you missed the math lesson, that's an Ancestry DNA 101. Okay, an hour goes by so fast, but again, this was a beginner class to just introduce you to the anatomy of a match list, help you start thinking about setting up those custom groups and using those to make some of those discoveries. I'm excited to read through the questions that you asked both in the chat and the questions you asked in the Q&A. I'll do my best to provide some additional educational opportunities for you, whether it's here on our Wednesday virtual events. You can go again to ancestry.com/education. We'll have our future events for March. We've already got them scheduled. We'll have those up on the webpage soon, so you can register for those. That's also where you can go scroll down that page, ancestry.com/education, to view the replays of the videos you might have missed. And again, if you haven't watched that Tree Building 101, DNA 101, you're going to want to make sure to watch those, take some notes, follow along. Super excited for you to continue to learn, to continue to make family history discoveries. Now, here's what I want you to do before you go. If you haven't already, in the chat, will you please leave me a comment in the chat about one new thing you learned today? That's very helpful for 2 reasons. It helps me know if I'm doing this right, and so that I can continue to improve and provide you with meaningful, useful education. I also think there's a benefit for you for actually typing out what you learned. You're more likely to remember it. So if you'll take a moment to do that before you sign off today, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of education in Ancestry. Thank you for being part of the Ancestry family history community and family. I love that I get to spend this time with you. You can find me all over social media, and hopefully you'll be back here next Wednesday or actually it's going to be 2 weeks. Next week, we're all at Roots Tech for a genealogy conference. But in 2 weeks, we'll be back here with another class for you all. So that's all I have for you today. Until next time, I'm Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.